Welcome to the Selling in the Motor Trade podcast, in association with Simco Training. This is the weekly podcast where we share best practice, tips and ideas on how to sell more cars, improve your service department, and generally put more profit into your dealership or dealer group. I'm your host, Simon Bowkett. Now, some of you probably already know me as Skippy. I want to start by saying thank you for taking the time to listen to this podcast. Hi, and welcome to another episode of Selling in the Motor Trade. It's my pleasure to introduce this time a really good friend. And I have to say that this man, Andrew Wakelin, I've known for, well, I'll have to work it out soon, Andrew, but probably too many years, okay? We were both a lot younger. I believe we're both exactly the same age within a month of each other or something like that. And this one is going to be so easy for me because I'm speaking to a friend. But this is someone you really need to listen to about what he's done in his career, how he's got to where he's got, because let me tell you this, I'm not just saying this because you are a friend, Andrew, you punch above your weight and the businesses that you've gone into and what you've done. So today, it's my pleasure to introduce Andrew Wakelin, who is now the Regional Operations Director for Stellantis You. Andrew, welcome.
Yep, indeed. Welcome. And I don't know how I'm going to live up to that introduction, Simon.
You will. So listen, Andrew, for people who may not know you, this podcast, there's lots of people who are senior managers, salespeople, aspiring people in the industry. And it's all about sharing tips and ideas of how to sell more cars, make more money, and improve the after-sales department and service department. So for people who might not know you, tell us a little bit about yourself. How did you get started in the motor trade?
Well, I started 34 years ago. I left school and became actually an apprentice electrician. My father wanted me to get a trade. That was the done thing back then. So it was all about getting a trade. And I did basically 12 months of that. And to cut a long story short, decided that it really wasn't for me. And that if I passed the first year exams, I would continue. If I failed them, I'd go off and sell cars was what I wanted to do. And anyway, needless to say, I passed the practical, but failed the written. And that was my out, if you like, to go off and try and sell cars. But of course, the problem with that was, as ever back then, you couldn't sell cars unless you had experience, and you couldn't get experience unless you sold cars. So there was only one route in that I could see, which was to start in valeting. So that's what I did. I found a company that became a self-employed valeter for 6 months, and then I found a job with a main dealer that was a driver valeter very quickly. And at 17, just turning 18, that's how I started.
So 17 you were at that stage, and you wanted to sell cars from 17?
Yes. Yeah. I'd always wanted to do that, yeah.
Yeah, it's quite funny. We have such a similar background. So I was 17 when I started the motor trade, and it was washing cars as well. And at the time, I don't know about you, but I personally hated it. If you look at my car now, Andrew, it's always dirty. The only time my car gets washed is if I'm in a dealership and a salesperson says, "Goodness sake, Simon, give me the keys to that car and let me get it washed," because I just did it. But in hindsight, I think it was a real good grounding, because I learned the business from almost the ground up. What did you learn from your time as a valeter driver that's really put you in good stead for the rest of your career?
Well, I think the biggest best value of it was I literally used to valet the cars next to the MOT bay in the workshop. So there was a lot to be learned on how the business operated close to the parts department. So, I was often watching. It was good. It was good in the nice weather, Simon. I'll give it that. But not so in the cold weather. But the driver bit helped me a little bit because it broke up that valeting. So I quite enjoyed the fact that I could get out and about. But a lot of valuable lessons learned, really. I think I worked for a Honda garage in Leeds for 6 years, and it was the main owner that gave me the shop, but he had a general manager that worked for him at the time. And certainly the biggest, most valuable lesson I learned was that he'd arrive at about 10 o'clock. He'd be on the golf course early doors. He'd arrive about 10 o'clock. He'd have his newspaper under his arm. He'd have his little dog to the right of him. He'd pull his car up onto the wash, a Honda Prelude. He'd pull it onto the wash, get out, literally throw the keys at me and say, "Clean that," and waltz upstairs, close his door, and start reading the paper. Different times, I guess.
Yes,
If
yes.
only I could have done that when I was a GM. But no, and I vowed from that day on that if I ever got anywhere in this industry, that I would not treat any member of staff in that kind of way, because I'd go back up the stairs after having cleaned it, slide the door open. It was like a patio sliding door, and slide it open, drop the keys on the desk, and he just wouldn't even lift his head from the paper. So it was, that's certainly a good bit of grounding and a good bit of value that made me understand. And from every dealership that I ever worked in and ran, and now indeed look after, I generally 9 times out of 10 walk in through the workshop.
Yeah.
And say good morning to everybody in the workshop. It's a big thing.
So important, that, isn't it? And it's we're going to get on to what you're doing at the moment, and I do know that in lots of dealer groups, and I've only ever been a general sales manager, Andrew, so I've not been a general manager or a dealer principal or doing what you're doing. But I do hear lots of people saying, "Hold on, our regional director turns up. They walk through the front door. We don't know they're even here. Someone has to go out and get them cakes and coffees or stuff like that, and they just leave." Okay, and it's the contrast is the people who really run a good business, they know everyone's names. Okay, now it's hard for you to know everyone's names out of all the businesses you need to look after, but I could tell you there's some people that I'm thinking of, they do know so much about all the people there, and it is a people business, isn't it?
Oh, it is, yeah, 100%. And as an operations director, I'm only a few months into the role with Stellantis You, but previous to working for Stellantis You, I was an ops director for Swansway and ran the Chester division. And again, you're absolutely right. The importance of knowing who's working for you, because this business is about people and process, isn't it? As we know, and processes are good and robust, and I've learned a lot from a lot of people along the way. And took all the best bits and joined them together. But without the right people, with the right attitude, and then looking after them, the job's hard work, isn't it?
Yeah. So tell me, how do you go from washing cars to actually your first job selling? Were you bashing on the sales manager's door all the time? Were you saying, I want this, I want this? How did you take that step?
Yeah, there was a lot of that. I think back in the day, the owner of a chap called David Hughes, who was a first big motor trade mentor. I mean, obviously, there's lots of mentors in your personal life with your parents, etc. But and your family, your important nearest and dearest, my good lady wife and kids. But in terms of working mentors, David Hughes was one of the big ones, and he used to have an aeroplane. And thankfully, because I did such a good job at cleaning the cars, he decided that I'd go and clean his aeroplane. And the beauty of that was I'd go and clean his aeroplane, have some good quality one-on-one time with him, because he used to take me up in it after I cleaned it.
Yeah, okay.
Quite nice. So that got me close to him so that I could air my wishes and where I wanted to be. But ultimately, the company sent out a questionnaire. And I just put one sentence after a lot of questions about, me and it's almost like an appraisal type scenario. And it said, what would you really like to do with it for the company? And I simply put, I'd like to earn the company money rather than cost the company money. And because obviously, inevitably, as a valeter, you were just a cost. But if you're selling cars, you're earning money and earning profit and incentivized to do so. And that was attractive, along with the car, of course.
Yeah. But again, someone reading that, I want to earn the company money. I got to say, lots of people listen to this podcast, and in our role, Andrew, how many days training have I done for you over the years? Okay. But the amount of times I train people in dealerships and they say, well, hold on, they've given the sales manager's job to Billy. Okay. Samantha's got the after sales manager's job. Why are they giving it to her there? And I always think, do people know that you want to move on? Okay. Have you actually done a good job of selling yourself? And also, I'll go one stage further. Start doing the next job before the job's given to you. What?
Absolutely. Yeah, that's exactly that you took the words out of my mouth. That is, you naturally start to do it because that shows your capabilities, and then it makes you the natural successor. And again, as I talk about influences as I've gone through, and I've learned a lot of my career, I owe a lot of gratitude to the Smythe family, Michael Smythe, Peter, John, and David, because I learned a heck of a lot in 23 years of working for them. Good operators, great operators, and these people influence you along the way, and you take the good that they do, and they show you all the time, don't you? But you do the next job before, and then you're the natural successor. The job almost comes to you then, because there's nobody else in the frame, because you've started absolutely doing it and showing what you can do without asking for any extra money. You just get on with it and just do it and show what your capabilities are. It comes naturally then. And if you work for the right people, then they never hold you back on that as well. I've spent a lot of time now, and we've done it wrong. I've done it wrong over the years in the early parts of management. Don't get me wrong. I did things a little bit wrong, but then you learn that it's easier to make sure you bring people on, empower them, give them extra duties naturally, so that they are learning and improving the business, because that is, you almost want to do yourself out of a job, whereas I think some management styles can be the opposite, where they think they've got to do everything, so they almost hold on to, well, I'll do that and I'll do that, and then number one, they're very busy and busy fools, and number two, they don't bring a succession underneath them, and therefore, it's hard work to just do everything and try and tick all the boxes.
I suppose that's one of my biggest Achilles heels. If you ever work for me and my company, they'll tell you I'm a control freak, and letting go is so difficult for me, because I always like, no, this is how I want the course run. I want this, I want that message, I want this here. And I know I frustrate, but listen, we're not perfect, are we? We all make mistakes there. But that's that whole control freak there. I struggle to let go. I really do. But you have to do it, don't you? And one thing else, I just want to pick up that you said, someone's listening to this who's, I don't know, a salesperson, maybe you're a service advisor, you want that next step up there. Just again, start doing it before it's giving you're the natural choice for it. Because too many times I get people saying, well, I'm not doing that. It's not my job. I'm not paid to do that. My service manager's paid to do that, and she or he's useless. So no, I'm going to wait till they fail. No, powers that be will see what's happening there. Just get in and start doing it from day one. So I want to ask, this is really separates the motor traders. Okay. Do you remember the first car you sold, Andrew?
I do, yeah. It was a Honda Civic LSI 1.5 automatic in red to Mrs. Greenbank.
See, I love that.
We lived in Ilkley, because it was in Leeds where I started in the motor trade. So I can picture the car. I think it was L601 MYG, I think was the original.
I just love that question, because it always separates. Well, firstly, when people start in the era, okay, because you can picture the car, okay, but also the motor traders, that buzz of that first deal, I don't think it ever goes away, does it?
No,
that buzz of that deal, it doesn't. Okay, so listen, this is a shameless plug for our first 90-day sales fitness program, and it is a shameless plug, and we say this to everyone, that there's lots of skills that we learn in our first 90 days, good and bad, that lasts us for the rest of our career, okay? And I'd normally ask you, is there anything specifically in the first 3 months that's as relevant today as it was when you started? I think you've half answered that, and it's treat people right to start with. Is there anything else from that first 90 days, though, that really is as relevant today in 2024 as it was when you started 34 years ago?
I think, again, people and process. Process was big. Process was big. It was just different. And obviously there was no online presence back then. So it was all just about, logging the customers, pre-qualifying the customers, test driving the customers was huge. I know it still is when they physically come in, but of course a lot of it's digital now. So your video is almost your test drive now in a lot of digital ways. And it's it's just adapted, hasn't it, as it's gone along, and thankfully, because you stay, and we're very, we always adapt, don't we? In this industry, we seem to be the best at it. Over the years, a lot of disruptors try and come in and have a go, and we still keep surviving because we know how to retail, we know how to look after customers properly, we know, that we need to do the process, and we do it well, I think, as an industry.
Okay, so listen, your time with Mr. Smythe, David, Peter, and John, you've learned lots there. Can you tell us a little bit about Mr. Smythe? I'm a fan of what he's done and how he's built. Sorry, Peter, if you listen to this, I can't remember. Is it 4 or 5 businesses successfully again and sold them again and again? What are some of the things you learned from Mr. Smythe? Or what are some of the stories? You told me one story about you charging a car up or something on there. Anything sticks in your mind?
I think, a legend of the industry, Mr. Smythe, Michael Smythe, I think, and then obviously 3 sons who work very well together as well. So I think, there's one, I'll never forget one time that we were having some issues in terms of some thefts and damage, particularly on RRG Bolton Toyota, which was where
it's where we met.
And that's where we met. Yeah, we're going back to the late 90s there, Simon, but let's not.
Okay.
It's a few years ago. But yeah, no, there's lots of things. Obviously, presentation was massive. And I've got to say, when I left the Honda site and went to work at RRG Bolton and worked for RRG, the difference was chalk and cheese. I'd gone from what I felt was really well done and well presented to what became, in comparison, a gym palace, really. RRG Bolton at the time, water fountain outside, gardens were mint, there's no coats on back of chairs, you're not drinking coffee at your desk. It was meticulous but right. And still to this day, I use most of those, if not all of those standards, because you don't have to do it that way in this industry. But I think it works. There's people do it differently. Some people don't do it like that and somehow survive. But the best, I think, do it the right way, and retail is detail. But no, there's lots of things, lots of lessons. I'll never leave a key in a car ever again. I think that was one of the biggest ones, because I remember having to get a car off the forecourt. It had a flat battery, so I needed to get the booster pack. So I had to move one car to get the car out. So I moved the one car, left it just on the car park, about 30 feet away from me, not too far away, left it running, while I then started the other one and got the other one out. And we had some car park, they were like car park treads, like metal.
One way in, one way out type of things.
Yeah. And Mr. Smythe had a particular speed at which he drove, and you kind of knew when most people would drive over it fairly fast, Mr. Smythe would just steadily come in, and you kind of knew and recognized that he was here. So I thought, oh, that's Mr. Smythe. And then indeed his Lexus drove past, and I started to cringe because I thought, I've left that car running over there with that key in. And
so you knew it was wrong.
I knew. Yeah, I knew.
Yeah,
I knew. And anyway, I then heard my name called. Is that one of my cars? Yes, it is, Mr. Smythe. Right, get the keys, come with me. And that wasn't a great moment. I'd spent a lot of time trying to get myself up the ladder and into senior sales, and part of what I was doing was moving the car on my own because there was nobody about, but I wanted to just impress and keep going. And I ended up in Peter Smythe's office, who was my general manager at the time, with Mr. Smythe basically saying, all the good work you've done, gone. I want it on his record. The insurance wouldn't pay out. You've left the key in. And it wasn't a great moment, to which he did his bit and left. And then I had to sort of say to Peter, and he said, look, just don't do it again. But big lesson. But that nervous time back then, it really was a heart dropping moment. But yeah, you can imagine I'm quite big on key security now. And that a good moment that was taken in the right way, and he did it in the right way, but he had a presence, you know, and still has. And you know, I mean, if there was a loose door handle on a toilet door, he'd spot it, you know, and it'd need to be fixed. And you know, but that was good. It was just good standards, and it kept everybody on their toes.
I have another story there, and this is not a podcast all about Mr. Smythe. Maybe it should be, but this one was a Honda dealer in a business that they'd purchased, and the head of business dealer principal was ready for what he called it, the royal visit. Okay, which sounds a bit derogatory, but I get it. It's like, let's make sure things are right. Phil Jones has listened to this podcast. He would paint drain covers black before they have a branch inspection to make sure the whole dealership looks good. Okay, retail's in the detail. But they had this situation that they cleaned the whole dealership. Everything was fine. The coffee area was right. He said, I know that Mr. Smythe will go to the toilets. So he goes and checks the toilets, got all that there. He had a newspaper. And it was, I don't know, Wednesday or something like that. And Tuesday's newspaper was still there. And he said, fucking hell, out of everything I've done, how does he have this ability to go straight to one newspaper? It was the wrong date. Now, I've never had that conversation with the Smythes. It might have been an accident or something like that there. But I tell you what, it's retails in the details. And the last thing about Mr. Smythe, can you just talk to people who might not know this person about coats on the back of the chairs and what that means to you? And is it all about coats on the back of the chairs, or what is it all about?
No, it's about standards generally, and just looking retail ready. You know, it's just the look. Most showrooms usually face onto a main road, and if somebody's looking in, it just does. Once you spot it, you start to think, yeah, it does look a bit scruffy. And to a lot of people, it's just not a thing, but it is a thing, and it then is about the other standards. You know, I mean, I still do branch inspections, which were a thing there as well, where we literally go in people's drawers and cupboards, and it's a spring clean at least once a year, but it makes the place look right all the time, and it keeps a pride in everybody as well, you know. And the customers might not pick up on it per se, but it's just the look, it's the feel, it just creates, in the same way a used car display, you know, done right, in the right color, you know, mixing the colors up, lined up like soldiers, you know, that does, a customer might not necessarily say, oh, wow, they're well lined up and your colors are right. But the impression it gives instantly makes people think, you know, they care. This place cares, and it looks better than the last place. And that's the key, isn't it? And we'll say it a million times, retail, you know, the detail is in the, you know, retail and detail are vital together.
So, Andrew, leading on from that, I have a question for you. Someone's listening to this podcast and they're about to go to a brand new business. So they might be in a dealer group. They're going to a dealership that's struggling and they want to turn it around. Now, listen, I know you turned up at a Peugeot dealership that was 168th out of the Peugeot Guild. They were, I don't even know how many Peugeot dealerships there are in the country, but 168, it was right down to the bottom. 2 years later, you got it to number one. Okay, that's a huge turnaround. What did you do to get that huge turnaround? So, and I suppose I'm asking, what advice you have to someone listening to this, that what could they do to do a similar thing?
Yeah, well, I mean, first of all, it was a team. I had to lead the team, of course, to get to that. But I don't want to. It was all about the engagement of every single member of staff in that business, letting them understand and know where they were, because some people didn't know they were down there. So having to, you know, so once you then start to put down the things that we need to, and it was all just about the basics as ever, you know, and ensuring that we can all, I think everybody in the industry knows what needs doing in a business, but the skill is, and the trick is to make sure everybody's doing it all of the time, every day. So the measures have to be on the board, regularly changed and updated, day by day, deal by deal, hour by hour. You know, when we've done a good job, we've gone green and celebrated it that day. You know, if we've done a poor job, we've understood why not. And then as a team, oh, we're not doing that tomorrow, let's catch it back. So it's just the buy-in and the animation of the site, along with all the other things that we know, the basics. But like I say, I think every head of business, general manager in every dealership up and down the land, and manager for that matter, will be able to tell you what needs doing.
Mm-hmm.
But the skill is making sure it gets done all the time.
Yeah, every day, every day.
Every day, without fail. Yeah. And measuring it.
So tell me, you turn up to a new business, okay? And this is something I've not done your job, okay? And I struggle to get my head around it. When you can be someone like me, who is a control freak, as my sales department, my sales team, this is how we do it. And if you were one of my salespeople, Andrew, I've got to tell you, you either hate me to start with, okay? Because it's like, why are you making me do it that way? But then it's realizing that, hold on, this is the way we do it. And people last with me for forever, okay? Because, or they'd come in within 3 weeks and say, this is not for me. It was very, very quick. But they knew I had the culture. I had our processes. This is what we did here. How do you do that, though, en masse? How do you do that? So you turn up to a new business. So you left the Peugeot dealership in Chester. You went to, I believe, one of the biggest Peugeot and Citroen dealerships in Manchester. Okay. You turn up. How do you get the culture right? What's one of the first things you do when you turn up to a new business? What do you look for?
Well, I think, again, you've got to let the people know what you're about, and you've got to do it I generally would do it in a one-on-one basis and get to know the person, not just their results on a piece of paper. And because, you might look at a set of stats for technicians and look at the best, the ones with the best efficiencies and the ones with the least efficiencies, and make an instant judgment. And you might do the same with, they're only selling 5 cars a month and they're selling 18 cars a month, 20 cars a month. And you can be very quick and to look at that and judge. You've got to get to know the people, understand why, and understand what's been going on in the business. I mean, I left Chester, you're right, and I actually went to Sale first. And then after that, I went to Manchester. But the one at Sale, it's both the same. You go in and you have one-on-ones. You find out what they enjoy about the business. You find out what the challenges are potentially in the business, and let them understand that you're there to help and support. And like I said earlier, don't get me wrong, in my early management career, you used to go in all guns a-blazing and think that was the way, but all that would do would turn staff and make you a busy fool yourself. And that I think, if you go back generationally and you go back, I don't know, 20 years or so, then, things were like that. But we know that bosses aren't a thing anymore. It's leadership and guiding people through things and helping them. And some people listening might find that surprise when they look at how I was earlier and where I am now. But we've had to adapt. But it's you've got to influence them, and you've got to understand them, and you've got to find out about them, what makes them tick, because we know that what somebody might be money driven, somebody else might be success driven, somebody they're totally different people. So you've got to understand who you've got working for you. And then you've also got to just make sure their attitude's right and people are there for the right reasons and will come with you on the journey. Give them the chance to come with you on the journey, because if you've got a challenging site that's not performing well, and I seem to have had a lot of them across my career, then I've ended up going into those to turn them around and had a lot of success. Again, using the processes and finding the right people. You only have success. I'm only as good as my weakest member. So the point is to not have weak members, but you've got to bring them on. And if you might still have weak members, and then of course you've got to have that conversation. And Andrew Wakelin to John Smith, then I might like that person, but you've got to separate that. And if you're the head of the business and you're the general manager to sales exec, or general manager to technician who's not performing, then it's a business decision. But you've got to help them, you've got to guide them, you've got to give them everything you possibly can, and then people get to understand. And because you go around the business and regularly speak to people as well, I said before about technicians, I can't tell you the amount of times I've gone into businesses and just talking to staff, just generally going around and talking and asking how they are, and they're amazed. Some people, I had it in a couple of businesses where people were just saying, we've seen more of you as a general manager in the first 2 weeks than we saw for 2 years of the last one. I think you alluded to it before, where you talk about ops directors going in and just going upstairs and then disappearing. I think some general managers do it, Simon.
Yeah.
And it's not intentional. They're busy, and we get buried behind these laptops, and we get buried behind, the stats, the figures, the numbers, and we're reporting this, we're reporting that, and we forget to go and speak to the key people that the people we've got and the people that are there doing the job for us, and appreciate them. We do a lot of buying breakfasts, as simple as that is. We do a heck of a lot of that. I get the recently, if we have a good quarter, I'll get the fish and chip van in. And these are things
goes a long way.
Oh, it goes a huge way, and it's such a simple thing. £650 for 65 people to have fish and chips at Manchester, for instance. Just was an event, and you let them dress down that day, and they just feel appreciated. Whereas I think we can all fall into that trap where we forget to appreciate not just the technicians and the sales execs, but admin and fleet admin and and accounts. Everybody would be involved, and everybody's eating fish and chips. It's not just about fish and chips, but you know what I mean. And we do it. We do it with breakfasts as well, and and team events in the past, go-karting, and just pulling people together. It's a vital part, and a night out for a meal or whatever it is. I think it's just important, and we certainly in a cost savings world that we're in. I think those things sometimes are the first things to get dropped, when in actual fact they're the things you shouldn't drop.
Yeah. Well, there's a story that you won't know because you weren't working there before. I did. There was a Volkswagen dealership in Wales that you were a general manager, and you moved on there. You hadn't been there for, I don't know, maybe 18 months. And the accountant there said, when we had Andrew Wakelin there, he was on a tricycle in the workshop, getting the technicians saying, come on, guys, we need to get to this. Where we're up to, what are we doing? Come on, let's get it through there. And it was actually one of the technicians there, workshop controller, were relaying this story about this mad guy called Andrew Wakelin that was on a tricycle riding around in circles there. You won't even remember the story, I'm sure. But
I do, because I think I was 19 stone at the time, and I lost a lot of weight since then. And I think, and it was one of them clown bicycles. It was one of them really small ones. Yeah, so I did look quite a sight. And I was also blowing a little horn at the time as well. So yeah, I do remember that. It's quite funny.
So put a bit of fun in it, but again, you knew the mechanics, you knew what they needed, where you needed to be there, and that must have been 18 months afterwards. And they're talking about this story, and they didn't realize I knew you, okay? And they're talking about this mad guy, Andrew Wakelin, okay, who could, by the way, remove the fly with a forehead with an axe. And I will say that people have said that about you as well. And again, I'm sure you'll know that, but sometimes.
Not the best part of my career, but yeah, I did do, because I did do things wrong back then, and but a lot of it was right, most of it was right, but I'm going back. I mean, I've changed a lot over the years, and realised that, as I said before, the best. I still think sometimes my reputation precedes me, but not necessarily a bad thing in some instances. But no, I'm a typical Yorkshire fella, so I just say things like they are, but in the right manner.
Yeah, that sounds good. That just leaves me to say that all details of this episode and other episodes on the selling in the motor trade can be found on our website, simcotraining.co.uk. Go there to get a copy of our book, Words That Sell Cars. Go there to sign up to a free trial of our Sales Fitness online sales training program. Easiest way to get hold of me is Simon Bowkett through LinkedIn. Thank you.